Hi, I'm Dr. Samantha Brody. Welcome to part 3 of my tutorial on using MyFitnessPal. Part 1 was how to get set up, part 2 how to enter individual foods, and this part 3 is more advanced applications and how to use the program more accurately. So the first thing that I'm going to point out here is that you'll see the interface is a tiny bit different, or I should say the layout here is a little bit different than in the other two videos, and that is because on the other ones I wanted to start with a blank slate so I could show you how to get things set up, and on this one it'll be more helpful for me to already have a bunch of things loaded in to be able to show you how to use the more advanced features. So what we're going to do is start with food in your food diary and look at breakfast. So what you will notice is that when in the other videos we'll see when you click on add food, it just gives you a blank page. Once you have things added in, it gives you a whole different set of choices. So there are a number of tabs here under add food. The first is most used, most recent. My foods are foods that you add in, and I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. My meals, and recipes. So let's go ahead and start with most used. So these are foods that I've entered in over and over and over again, and you can go ahead and check off exactly what you had for breakfast. So I had poached eggs, and most commonly I have 2, so that's showing up there, and 2 cups of raw kale with, let's see, some garbanzo beans, and let's see, a little bit of olive oil. So olive oil isn't showing up on this page of most common foods. So I'm going to go ahead and check those 3, add checked, and then I can go ahead and add in olive oil. And you will notice here the same thing that we talked about in video 2, where you have the things that members added with the asterisk, or things that have no asterisk, which is preloaded into the program. I had a teaspoon. They have that as an option. Otherwise, I could have done 0.33 of a tablespoon, add to food diary. Okay, there's my breakfast. So a couple of really cool things that you can do with this at this point. The first is you can say, remember meal. So let's say that I eat this meal 3 days a week. I have to go and check the things off and re-enter them every time. Or I can say, remember meal. Or replace an existing meal, which will give you the option to, that's how you would change a meal if you suddenly start having spinach, say, instead of kale. But I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to say tutorial egg kale breakfast. And then I'm going to save it. All right. So let's go ahead and jump and say it's the following day, and you're going to add your food for breakfast. You can actually go ahead and check those same things off. Recent will bump all those things to the top, or you can go to My Meals. And this is all alphabetical, and so we're going to go down to tutorial egg kale breakfast. Add checked. And it's going to add it all in there. Another way that you can reproduce the same meal is to go to Quick Tools, and you're going to say copy to date, and it's going to give you tomorrow. So you can take the same meal, and it will put in, it added it, okay, I see what happened. I was saying tomorrow is in the day after I was entering, but this is actually today is the 5th, so it re-added it to what is actually tomorrow. I'm going to go ahead and delete those. So it appeared that it was adding it twice on the same day, but it was not, because I was already on tomorrow. Which is another thing you can do with this, right? We talked about that in video 2. If you want to plan your meals ahead of time to know what you're going to be eating, so you'll have an idea of how much latitude you'll have later in the day, you can just go ahead and preload it. Okay, so now we're going to go to lunch. And again, this is actually today. Here, I pre-filled that in so I could show it as some examples. I'm going back to Wednesday the 6th. All right, so I'm going to add lunch here, add a food. Now I want to use a recipe. So I'm going to go over here to recipes, and these are recipes that I have already entered into the program. So last weekend, I made myself a buffalo and pastured lamb meatloaf, and I'm having a slice and a half of that for lunch. I'm going to go ahead and add it into checked. And it's going to give us the numbers right here. Let me show you where those came from. If you click up here under food, recipes, you can add recipes in here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on one that I already have in, the one that we just added, so you can see what's in there. So there are a couple ways of doing this. If you're making a recipe from a cookbook, you can just go ahead and copy it on in. If you are making up your own recipe or you're adjusting a recipe as you're going, you keep a little notepad right next to the stove as you're putting in. You just write down how much of anything is going in. Weigh stuff, measure it, whatever's necessary to get an accurate assessment of what you're putting in there. So for instance, I adapted a recipe to make this meatloaf. And it only called for 1 egg, and I wanted to add another egg. It only called for, a small amount of, or called for 2 stalks of celery, and I put in 1 stalk. So I just adjusted it as I went. And when it was done, I cut it into 8 slices. That doesn't, so when we say serves 8 people, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're only going to have 1 slice or that's the appropriate sized serving, but that's how we're going to know exactly what's in it. So if you remember, we're going to go back here to food diary. What I put here on the 6 is that I had 1.5 servings. So I had 1.5 pieces of this meatloaf. So that's giving me an accurate amount. Now, the reason it's important to do this, to go ahead and add in the recipes instead of just guessing, is if you add a food from the database, it's going to be different than what you made. So I'm going to go ahead and put in here buffalo meatloaf. And it's going to give me a bunch of things that different people made. So I'm going to say homemade buffalo meatloaf, but that's in muffins. So I'm not going to be able to say a slice and a half. So let's go ahead and have a different one. Keep looking. Buffalo Bob's meatloaf, 1 slice. Perfect. So again, let's go ahead and say 1.5 servings. So the size matches up. 1.5 slices of this, same 1.5 slices of the other. Now, I obviously wouldn't eat both of these in one meal, but I put these right next to each other to illustrate how much of a substantial difference there can be between guesstimating a food and actually entering the recipe. So this 1.5 slices of meatloaf has way fewer calories, way less fat, less protein, and it has a completely different profile. So there are going to be times where you have to guesstimate. If you go out to dinner, you're at a Thai restaurant, you're having Thai curry, you obviously aren't going to get the recipe to enter it. But most of my patients are eating home many meals because they're trying to eat more healthfully, because they have some kind of health goal. They're trying to eat more vegetables, they're trying to lose weight, they're trying to have a more varied diet, whatever it is, and they also want to have more control over what they're eating as a rule. So when you're making things at home, you can track it almost exactly. It means getting a food scale to be able to weigh out how much meat or whatever you're adding in if you're going to weigh it instead of measure it, and then having accurate measuring tools as well. So back to the day before. The recipes that you put in there also can be changed by clicking on the recipe. Can't do it there. Let's go ahead back up here. Recipes. Buffalo and pastured lamb meatloaf. You can go ahead and delete and add here, add an ingredient, and make changes. There seems to be a way to add these to the database by the whole recipe, but I do not think that they are yet using recipes that people enter. Okay, those are the main, more advanced ways to track your food. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments here, and I will try to answer them. I wish you luck and have fun, and later.